Hi, everybody. This is the final part of episode number 131, part one. Had an unfortunate technical glitch, and so instead of starting this episode, recording it from the beginning again, I'm just going to finish off my look at The Flash Volume 1, 167 here. And then unfortunately, you're going to have to listen to this in two chunks. And so I'm sorry that the main part ends on such an abrupt point. I just didn't know that the glitch was coming. Can't be helped. I just about finished my synopsis of issue 167 of The Flash, and I was musing on the final page where Barry Allen is considering whether Kid Flash actually got his speed powers by accident, or whether they had something to do with the intervention of Mopey. And Barry, in the end, figures that Kid Flash did indeed get his powers without any paranormal intervention. I think that also speaks to The Flash Rebirth by Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver a few years back, in which Johns explained that Barry created the Speed Force when that lightning strike hit him and he was doused with chemicals and he was turned into the Flash. And so he created the Speed Force not only as a source which he could tap into, but as well the Speed Force grew and it reached out and touched others who could join Barry on his quest to fight injustice. And so people like Jay Garrick, Max Mercury, and Wally West were destined to become speedsters because they were all honorable people who had this great potential to use their powers for good. Also, something to consider here coming out of this issue. Would any of Mopey's people have been involved in giving any other members of the DCU their powers? That's a concern. Might one of Mopey's people given Kal-El those great powers upon his arrival upon Earth? Hawkman, did he happen to get any of his powers from an initiate 8th class or 7th class, let's say? I'm thinking back to when Scott Snyder was exploring the dark multiverse and looking at Nth Metal, and there was the implication that Nth Metal was responsible not only for Hawkman, Hawkwoman, and Hawkgirl deriving their powers, but it could be said that Nth Metal was on Krypton, such that when Kal-El was sent to Earth, any Nth Metal that he might have ingested as an infant would have stayed within his body, and that was what caused him to develop these great powers under a yellow sun. And, it's kind of nice to come up with unifying factors and saying, okay, well, there is a point of commonality amongst all of these heroes. They were all destined. They're all brought together by something. But at the same time, it also takes away from that uniqueness amongst the characters. And it takes away from that simplicity of those iconic origins. Quite simply, Superman rocketed to Earth as an infant from a planet that had a greater level of gravity, different properties due to orbiting a red sun. So under a yellow sun, his physiology would react in such a way that he had these godlike powers. Wonder Woman, from the Amazon people who were created by the Olympian gods. It would stink to say that there was something more than just years of training and dedication on Bruce Wayne's part. I think Bruce Wayne would feel cheated if he realized that he got his heightened intellect and powers as a result of having nth metal somewhere in his system. So this is an additional reason for me to say, okay, I'm glad that this story involving Mopi is not considered a major part of the Flash's history. And in fact, Mopi would make only one more appearance in the DCU prior to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And in fact, post-Crisis, I don't think Mopi has appeared anywhere since. But I'm appreciative for Mopi's appearance in issue number 3 of Ambush Bug, which was released in August of 1985 as the Crisis on Infinite Earths was beginning in earnest. Just a really fun issue in which Ambush Bug attempts to chronicle the entire history of the DC universe. And as he's going along, he's coming across all of those impish, comedic, often forgotten characters from throughout DC's history. And we get this really neat page with Mopi, where he hasn't changed any in terms of his look. He's still got this wildly unkempt hair, this jowly appearance, diminutive chin, oversized glasses, all contributing to the sadly stereotypical depiction of the quote-unquote nerd. But in this issue of Ambush Bug, Mopi claims that he did far more than give Flash his super speed. He takes credit for directing Kal-El's rocket to Earth. He takes credit for the rise of number of JLAers. He even goes so far as to argue that he was directly involved in Marvel characters such as Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, the Fantastic Four, all getting their powers. And the beauty with Ambush Bug is, because he's such a bizarre character whose mental health and state of awareness has to be questioned, you can take this whole issue as just being this weird mind trip that Ambush Bug is going on, and that nothing that he's seeing in this issue is actually happening at all. So I'd like to think that issue 167 of The Flash takes place completely in Ambush Bug's mind, and it's just Ambush Bug saying, you know, wouldn't it be funny if there was this weird character named Mopi who did give the superheroes all of their powers? I wonder. Food for thought, because, you know, I'm certainly on the side of those who say that we should never take stories and say that, you know, they didn't happen. They're erased from history. I think that's wrong. I think you can certainly say that in the aftermath of events like Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis, Flashpoint, Rebirth, reality is realigned in such a way that characters' histories and memories are radically altered. And so it's not that they didn't have certain experiences or they didn't meet certain characters. It's that they don't remember certain things happening in a past reality. Those memories have been taken away from them. But if the conditions were right, a subsequent realignment might result in the restoration of some of those memories. Still, I don't want this to be the actual origin of Barry Allen. Unfortunately, if you look at the absolute edition of Crisis on Infinite Earths in the supplementary material, it is explained that this story takes place on Earth 32, which I like because not long before I went on hiatus, I got a chance to talk about Earth B, the Earth to which most of those crazy Bob Haney, Batman, Wildcat, Batman and various character team-up stories were consigned. And in subsequent years, historians said, well, Earth B should actually be broken up into at least a couple of Earths, one of those being Earth 12. And then for the stories that are really goofy, that are really out there, you can say that those took place on Earth 32. So that's where all those Bob Hope and Jerry Lewis stories, etc., take place. And given this story, this zany story here with Mopi and Heavenly Helpmates, just that term Heavenly Helpmates makes you think, yeah, this is an Earth 32 story. So this story can be placed within continuity. It should not be considered erased. It just happened somewhere else. Now, I said there was one point of criticism I had for the art in this story. And outside of that point of criticism, this is great art by Infantino. Certainly, his work would inspire other artists who would strive to go beyond what he was putting out. But it's a physical depiction of Mopey that concerns me. As I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, when we see Mopey, he's very short in stature. His hair is wild. It's unkempt. It looks like, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, alopecia, the hair condition where a person loses chunks of hair at a time. They're not really going bald, just due to different factors. They end up with large bald spots. And you see that here with Mopey. His head looks bigger than the rest of his body. He's wearing open-toed sandals. His cloak's way too big for him. The glasses are really pronounced. And you wonder why, if he's this higher-level being, would he need such eyewear? You see some of his elders, and they all look like they were tall and strong and virile earlier in life. So you wonder, what's the deal with Mopey here? His ears stick out, his cheeks rather puffy, and yet his chin is just so small. He can't keep his glasses on straight. It's all part of, that trope of taking the socially awkward, geeky character and just making them look ridiculous. And, it really would have struck me if Mopey had been portrayed in this issue differently on a physical level. Like, it is fun seeing him being goofy and having a hard time expressing himself clearly and confidently, but it would have been neat to see him as someone who was tall, dark, and handsome, to use an old expression. I think that would have been a neat twist. So that readers could say, okay, well, you know what, I consider myself as something of, an outsider, but I can still identify with this guy, and, just because I'm a certain way doesn't mean that I have to look a certain way. I don't want to get too politically correct here, but at the same time, I feel that Infantino and Mr. Fox plied it on a bit thick with Mopey's visual depiction here. And it would have made for something unique in comics to show him looking so unstereotypical. Is that a word? I guess so. Sorry. A bit rusty here, folks. So that's going to bring my review of The Flash number 167 to a close. Despite my criticism of the story and the depiction of Mopey, it's still a fun read. I mean, if you can pick up a copy online or in the trade somewhere, give it a read. Just sign of the times. Some fun Silver Age writing here. And certainly I'm going to have some really good things to say about Justice League of America issue 167. Because, boy, I enjoy that issue a whole lot. So I'm going to bring things to close here, folks, so that I can come right back and record part 2 of episode number 132. Just as a heads up, just to space things out, part 2 will come to you sometime in April, just to spread things out. And I really hope that I can come back and record episode 133 sometime. But for those of you who don't care to hear about my adventures outside of podcasting, I'm just going to say it's so great to be back on the airwaves, even if temporarily. Please feel free to go on over to Comics in History Facebook page, or send me a line at comicsandhistory@gmail.com. Always love hearing back from listeners, whether you have been with the show for a long time or if you're new. I find it amazing in recent days seeing the number of new views for Comics in History, and I thank you folks. So with that said, until